Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking about a topic that conflicts my thoughts a lot, which is living in Canada. And I say conflicts because I have a love-hate relationship with this country. I've gone through my lowest points when I was living there, but at the same time I've had the most amazing and fun moments there too. I lived in Canada for 6 years. I moved there in 2015 to an area called Etobicoke, and in 2018 I moved to Waterloo, Ontario until June 2022 when I graduated university. It's the perfect time for me to make a video on this topic because I feel like now that I haven't lived in Canada for almost 6 months, it's so much easier to look at the overall experience from like an outsider perspective and really reflect on my entire time that I spent there and recognize the best and the worst parts about living in Canada. First of all, I feel like coming from Latin America, I grew up watching so many American/Canadian TV shows. So I always wanted to experience like the Anglo North American life experience because everything that I saw on TV about that lifestyle was so different to what I was used to back in Latin America. And I'm not complaining about my life in Latin America. We have so many cool things too that, you know, you can't get in other places. But it was just that like growing up, seeing something on TV and wanting to experience that. For instance, in the Dominican, we live in apartment buildings, whereas the things that I would see on TV was like these huge like suburban American houses with like bay windows and breakfast nooks, which wasn't really common where I come from. Also, like now you can stream shows and movies whenever you want, but back in the day things would get released in Canada and the US before they got to the Dominican Republic. So if you spent your summer like in the US or in Canada, it was literally like going to the future because you would go back home to the Dominican and you would have already had watched movies and episodes from shows that hadn't been released in the Dominican yet. Also, because it was usually like something that you would do over the summer, you would come back to school with the best school supplies. For example, I remember I spent a summer in the US, and when I went back to school I was like one of the first people to have the pencil colors that also had an eraser, so you could like erase the color, which was, you know, the craziest thing you could imagine. But when it actually became a reality that I could move to Canada, suddenly I didn't want it anymore. I just didn't want to leave like my friends, my family, and I think when a big change comes to your life, that's when you really appreciate the comfort of what you already had that maybe you didn't recognize before. So honestly, when I moved to Canada for a while, I was so ungrateful. I was very close-minded, and honestly, I hated living there. I was just having a very difficult time trying to see the positive side of the situation. Obviously, over time, that mentality and that mindset changed, but now that I'm not in Canada anymore, I appreciate some things that I never thought I would. Just a reminder that this is my opinion. Everything that I'm going to talk about is based on my experience. Some people have different experiences, which is totally valid, and there's no right or wrong. This is just what I think based on the experiences that I've had living in Canada. As always, I'm going to start with the cons and end with the pros so we can finish everything on a high note. Coming from Latin America, getting used to Canadian culture is very difficult. And I don't think this is something that's just exclusive for people coming from Latin America, because I've talked to immigrants from different backgrounds and they all seem to struggle with the same thing. In Canada, people are so nice, which I appreciate so much. It feels really good to go somewhere and people are helping you out, but it's definitely a different kind of nice than what I was used to back home in the Dominican Republic. In Latin America, when someone moves to a new country, everyone's like, you just got here, I'm gonna show you everything, you can come to lunch in my house, come meet my mom, come meet my grandma, like my house is your house, you can come anytime you want. And like it's really easy to get close to people because everyone's so like open to including you in their lives and in their personal lives. So like you quickly make those connections with people where you feel like you can be like laid back and you can rely on them or reach out if you need help for like something big. But I felt like in Canada, even though you spend a lot of time with people, it's really difficult to create those deeper connections with friends. And I feel like sometimes you can know someone for so many years, but you barely know anything about them other than like superficial stuff. So in the Dominican Republic, my friends' parents are like my aunts and my uncles, but in Canada, there's people that I've known for the past 6 years and I've never seen their parents or been invited to their house, which in my culture, that's completely different. I would say that in Latin America, people are a bit more open to welcoming newcomers and really embracing them into their circle. Whereas in Canada, people are a lot more reserved and cautious when letting people into their inner circle. That being said, it is possible to make really good friends in Canada and make deep connections with them. Some of my closest friends right now are Canadian and they're my family. I miss them and I love them so much. But getting to that point took a long time, or at least longer than the time that it would take me back home. So yes, it took a lot of time, a lot of tears, a lot of feeling sad and feeling like I would never make real friends in Canada, but I got there. It just takes a lot of patience. I know you're gonna get there too. And you know, sometimes it's better to take longer to make sure that you're making deep, meaningful connections instead of just hanging out with people that maybe don't have your best interests at heart. Another con, and something that I haven't seen happening that much back in the Dominican, is that in Canada, everybody's like so ready to sue you. For instance, neighbors are always on the lookout to see what you're doing wrong. And it feels like they're always looking out for different ways to pick up a new argument. Like, your dog is barking too loud, complain. Your fence is 1 centimeter too close to your neighbor's property, complain. Which, true story, the fence wasn't close to their property, but the person still came out with a ruler to make sure that we weren't trespassing. And just so many stories like that that are very unfortunate, because it's not so much the message. I get it, you want your property and you want your peace in your home to be respected, but the biggest issue for me was the attitude that people would put forward when bringing up those concerns. Back home, your neighbor is someone that you can talk to before you take any like extreme measures. But in Canada, it felt like neighbors didn't have a lot of patience or empathy or tolerance for mistakes. It always just felt like an attack. I lived in 2 different neighborhoods in Etobicoke, and this happened in both of them. And from other people that I talked to living in the GTA, they also had some experiences like this. And obviously, I feel like there's no right or wrong in how to approach these situations. I'm not saying that they weren't in their right to bring up their concerns. It's just that for my family and for me, that's not the experience that we'd have back home in handling arguments with neighbors. So that was definitely a big culture shock for us. The con number 3 is super obvious, but this has to be brought up when talking about living in Canada. Weather. Just thinking about it, I get so like triggered. The winter was so freaking long. You really need to come up with ways to make it fun, because personally, seasonal depression was brutal, especially coming from the Caribbean. During the winter, all you can do is indoor activities. I mean, obviously you can do things outside, but it's freezing, literally freezing. So you spend a lot of time like going to the mall, shopping, going to the movies, binging TV shows at home, which all these things are things that I love and I consider hobbies, but I just wish we had more options of things to do. Especially where I lived, winter sports weren't that big of a thing unless you like grew up skiing and snowboarding. In that case, you can go to Blue Mountain, I guess, which is like northern of the GTA, but this is like super expensive, so choose your battles. It's cold from October to early May, and it's really cold from December to early April. And the worst part about this is that you don't have the motivation or the energy to leave your house, because it's not only cold, it gets dark at like 4 or 5 p.m. Before I had a car, I obviously had to like walk or take the public transit everywhere, but it's like cold or windy or snowy, so you avoid leaving your house at all costs. And then when I finally had a car, I was so scared to drive in the winter. It was my biggest fear. Not just driving through blizzards where you literally can't see anything and you're just, you know, like holding on for dear life, but black ice, I had never experienced that before. And you know, when people talked about it, I was like, it can't be that bad. Like, little did I know, like, there's nothing scarier than driving down the street and suddenly you lose complete control of your car and there's literally like not that much you can do. So just make sure that you get your winter tires. Don't forget about that. This can literally save your life. And just be super duper cautious. If you don't feel comfortable driving in the snow, don't do it. Another con is the work-life balance, which doesn't exist. You work and go home and that's it. What I love the most about living in the UK now is that people finish work and everybody meets at the pub and they all have like a drink together. And I feel like in Canada, everyone is so absorbed in productivity and like go, go, go that people don't really make time for leisure into their schedule. Also, for some people, it's not even a choice. The GTA is a very expensive area. So some people, actually most people, hold more than one job at a time. Or if you live in the suburbs and you work in the city, you're going to spend multiple hours of your day commuting because the traffic on the 401 is insane. And the last con. Every time I tell someone I live in Canada, they're like, oh my god, the mountains, the scenery, incredible. Like, it must be so beautiful where you are. I totally agree with that. But I don't live in BC, I don't live in Alberta. And all those pictures that you associate with Canadian life, or even when you put like Canada on Google search, all of that is in BC and Alberta. When you live in Ontario, the landscape is gonna look a lot like this. I love you so much, Ontario. I just have to do like pros and cons for this video, but I fucking love you. And now onto the pros. Diversity and multiculturalism. No matter where you come from, I'm convinced that you're gonna find your community, especially when it comes for restaurants and ethnic stores. You can find literally anything and everything in the world, you can find it in the GTA. For instance, in the Dominican Republic, we have this cassava bread called casabe that my family would buy so much of every time we went back home, and we'd like ration it out throughout the year until we would go back home for the holidays. Until one day we were at like a random supermarket in I don't know where, and they had an entire Dominican section with heaps of cassave. So do your research. I guarantee you that you're gonna find all the ingredients that you can find from back home. Also, what I love about being a foodie in Toronto is that there's restaurants from all over the world and you get a chance to try so many new cuisines. For instance, living in Playa del Carmen and in the Dominican Republic, back when I lived there, we didn't have good Korean or Ethiopian restaurants, which are some of my favorite cuisines now, or even good sushi places. I'm sorry guys, but cream cheese does not belong on sushi rolls. I hate it. No shade to my hometowns. I love you guys so much, but in Toronto, the diversity and the quality of these foods is so much better. Also, cultural festivals. They're running all year long. I've been to the Ukrainian Fest, the Taste of the Kingsway. It's like all the restaurants on this section of the Kingsway, and you get to try like tasters of the menus and the upcoming dishes. I really want to go to Caribana and the Taste of the Danforth because I didn't get a chance to, but I will be back just for that. Another pro is the social programs. The government funds a lot of social programs, which even though I didn't need some of them, I do know people that needed help with health and welfare related expenses, and they did receive a lot of help from the government, which, you know, it's obviously a relief to know that the people that you care about are getting the resources and are being supported through difficult times. Also, another thing that was really helpful for me and that I definitely recommended to any newcomers to Canada, especially high school students, because this program is more targeted for them, was the Newcomers Orientation Week program, or NOW program. It's basically a program designed for newcomers to the country to get to know their new school, their new neighborhood, and they overall prepare you for like the cultural shock of moving to a new country. Another pro that I really enjoy and miss and cherish is that you can walk places, which I know that sounds super like simple, but I grew up somewhere where you couldn't really walk from like point A to point B. So I really loved the freedom that I had being able to walk places. Even in Toronto in the winter, there's ways of making it more comfortable for you to walk around the city. There's this connection of tunnels called path that basically function as undergrounds connecting different parts of the city. And it's full of like restaurants, hair salons. Basically, most businesses are connected through the path. So you can stay warm and safe during the winter while you're also walking around the city. My favorite areas to walk around in Toronto were St. Lawrence Market, Queen Street, King Street, Yorkville, and Kensington Market. In Etobicoke, the neighborhoods are also super walkable. One of my favorite things to do is just walking around the neighborhood, especially in the fall and the summer. The colors are so beautiful. Also, people put so much effort like decorating the front of their homes depending on the season. And as an HGTV addict, I just really appreciated the decoration and all the aesthetic that the different seasons brought. Another thing about living in Canada that I really appreciate is that it makes me appreciate sunny days a lot more. Like coming from the Dominican Republic, obviously every single day is really hot. So when you move somewhere where that's not the norm, you appreciate those days so much more. I'm convinced that if Canada didn't have such a long winter, it would be the best country in the world because Canadian summers are amazing. And the thing is that at least in Ontario, there's so many weekend getaways that you can do, like Muskoka or Kawartha or Tobermory or the Thousand Islands. Just make sure that if you want to have these cottages experiences over the summer, that you book very far in advance because everything books out. And if you leave things to the last minute, the only things that you're going to be able to find are probably worth like thousands of dollars a night. So book in advance. Another thing that I love to do in the summer is spending the day like at wineries in the Niagara region and then getting lunch and ice cream in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara-on-the-Lake is my favorite town in Ontario. Obviously, if you're in the Niagara region, you might want to go to the falls. Just keep in mind that in the weekends, during the day, it's so packed. So you either have to get there at like super early hours of the morning or go at night, which is what I used to do because usually it was less crowded and I like to see the falls lit up. So to conclude, at the end of the day, what really matters is the community that you build for yourself. My worst years in Canada had a lot to do with the mindset that I had at the moment. Super negative. I didn't want to see the good things about living there, and you know, I feel like I definitely could have taken better advantage of that time, but also it was a lesson on how to appreciate the moment and how to see the positive in things, which I now carry with me. Canada has a lot to offer you. Just keep an open mind, stay positive, and if you do realize that, you know, maybe it's not working out for you right now, like try to change your approach, try to talk to new people, put yourself out there. It's a long process, I'm not gonna lie. It's difficult, at least for me. It was very difficult, but I am so grateful for the opportunities and for the time that I spent there. And I miss my friends so much, and I miss driving in the back roads, and I really miss the fall colors and going on hikes And I really miss Sephora and Dollarama. Anyways guys, let me know in the comments if you can relate to any of these experiences living in Canada, and if you have any more questions about my time there, don't hesitate to ask questions in the comments or leave me a message on social media. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.